That said, the biggest problem I had was all the recapping. I understood that there was a bit of time between the older books, and thus the reader may needed to be reminded of prior events, but there was just too much of it. Hello, welcome to another book review. I'm your host, Kristen, and today I will be reviewing the YA fantasy book, Strong Hearts Are Mandatory, Truth and Phantasm by Tila Peltier. In case you're interested in buying this book afterward, content warnings are animal injury/death, horror imagery, murder, nightmares, hallucinations, anxiety attacks, mentions of abuse, explosions, neglect, manipulation, torture, possession, and fire. I will start with the overall plot, then writing, world building, and finding of the characters. Also, this review will be spoiler free until between these timestamps, so if you want to avoid spoilers, I recommend skipping over that section. Now that those notes are out of the way, let's begin. According to the back of the book, the plot is as follows. Video has finally found the answers to who, or what, this gesture really is. It's all or nothing. Once the sorcerer has revealed his intention of having all of social media crumble in his grasp. Video and radio have to do the unthinkable to stop the mass murder across media and team up with a few unlikely heroes to make the most formidable team they can against this merciless mage before he casts darkness over media forever. Together they dive into the study of forbidden magic and dig deeper than ever to locate the last living mage, but find things go further than they ever imagined. Video has to put all her principles to the test when she realizes many more people than she initially thought weren't who they really seemed. For the plot, it was pretty good. It did take a bit to get to the main conflict involving Phantasm, but the points leading up to it weren't necessarily bad. I liked how Video was rightfully furious at her mother for taking Phantasm's advice on rebuilding Orite City after all the mage had put Video through in the last book. I also enjoyed Video's interactions with both Film and the King, in which she admitted to magic use, along with detailing more rules about how said magic worked. Plus, Phantasm rebuilding himself piece by piece and learning how to be alive again was a neat perspective. However, there were some pacing issues that bothered me. For one, after the main problem did kick off, the book had trouble keeping up the stakes. I think one of the main reasons for this was due to all the recapping, which I'll get into during the writing section. A second issue that will also be tackled in the writing portion was one of the conversations between Video's family and Phantasm slaughtered the tension. After Phantasm had attempted to destroy all of media, however, that was where the climax really picked up speed. Video and Truth rushing to stop the mage was intense, especially since they only had a certain window to do it. The ending fight between Video and the mage was also exciting. Video had to try and outwit the sorcerer while getting constantly thrashed. In this book, the writing was a mixed bag. The descriptions have gotten better and more colorful. I also adored Video's interactions with new characters and even some returning ones. That said, the biggest problem I had was all the recapping. I understood that there was a bit of time between the older books, and thus the reader may needed to be reminded of prior events, but there was just too much of it. It bogged down the pacing of the novel to the point of destroying most of the tension when pages upon pages were dedicated to rehashing old events. Another instance that irritated me was how in the middle of the book, Video's family and Phantascope started arguing on whether or not Audio had cheated on Signal with the mage. I got that it was supposed to be a funny scene and a small break from all the action, but all it did for me was left me wondering what the conversation had to do with the overall plot. It completely derailed the focus of the novel and seemed like it could be cut out entirely, especially since this was already a point of contention in Book 3. Finally, the monologues from Truth also weren't super great. I did like that Video demanded answers after finding out who Truth was, but the way the information was delivered was less than stellar. Since the rest of Phantascope's backstory and the truth about Queen's satisfaction was given through paragraphs of info all at once, it was overwhelming and hard to keep straight. I did like the remaining pieces of Phantascope's story, and it added many more layers to his character. However, I wish that had been spaced more gradually to have more of a natural flow. The world building in this novel was great, especially when it expanded upon how magic worked. Video explaining her usage of the cube, how attacks had to be direct, and that one had to channel magic using the character's true name to film, felt natural. Another detail I liked was how the process of becoming royalty was explained when Video's family went to obtain their noble status thanks to their blood ties with the Galactic Cinema Star. Not only were the new council members more formally introduced, but there were also new, exciting side characters as well. Finally, the eastern part of Media was thrilling to explore. All the cities in different light colors to determine who arrived from which section, along with the train stations in mixed colors, were cool. The secret hideouts were also neat, and it would be fabulous to see more of that part of Media later on too. I didn't think it was possible after what she went through with Screen, but Video actually had it worse in this book. Phantascope kept constantly attempting to kidnap or hurt her, both in dreams and by using shadows. Worse, Video was still emotionally impacted by the events of the last book, and this only added more to her ordeal. It was bad to the point where Video simply seeing the mage was enough to bring her to tears. It was a sharp contrast from Video's attitude in Book 1, so it made the reader aware of how much mental and emotional trauma Phantascope had caused. I did have a few tiny problems with Video. My biggest complaint was that having her cry every single time got grating after a while. Video tearing up during every Phantascope encounter made it so it took away emotionally from the moments where her reaction should have left a larger impact. Now, just to make things clear, crying due to trauma in real life is a perfectly valid response. In a book, however, there needs to be a balance between the character having an emotional moment and the event that is occurring. A second, more mild issue was that Video wasn't consistent personality-wise when it came to interacting with a mage named Truth. Again, Video's reaction could be from all the trauma she went through, but it was still jarring how hot and cold she was with the mage. For instance, when they first met, Video called Truth a traitor and didn't want to hear a word the mage said. The next moment, however, Video was trusting all the history Truth told her as fact. If Video was wary of mages due to her history with them, then why does she constantly flip-flop on how she treated Truth? It was rather confusing. All that aside, Video had an interesting overall arc in this book as she figured out more family secrets and her own biases against magic. I wonder what she will have to deal with in the next novel. Part of me hopes that maybe she'll finally catch a break. As for Truth herself, she was okay. Her history and relationship to Phantascope was rather interesting. I wish that the two had gotten to interact more than only twice, given their history. According to Tila herself, and as heavily hinted at in the book, Truth is also a lesbian and was in love with Queen Satisfaction. Hooray for representation! Although she was a character with great potential, it seemed like Truth wasn't fully fleshed out. I think this was once again because of the monologues. Instead of Truth developing gradually, her entire backstory was given to the reader all at once. In turn, this made it difficult for me to really form a connection with the mage, which also lessened the emotional impact her scenes were meant to have. However, considering this is only book 4 out of 6, I imagine that Truth will be a reoccurring character, so it will allow the audience more time to get attached. Can't wait to see what she gets up to in book 5. Unfortunately, Radio didn't get a whole lot of page time in this book. What little bits she was featured in, though, were quite entertaining. As usual, Radio was a brat, but was more tolerable. She was being a better partner to Stereo, and didn't complain when it came to fixing the city. All that said, Radio did go through an interesting bit of development in that she was still holding a grudge against Video, not to mention how the noble was playing with fire when she used some of her magic to help with the repairs. Unlike the summary described, she and Video didn't look into sorcery, but rather Radio tricked Video into casting magic against her will. Another part of Radio's arc that I really liked was when it came to who was going to be in charge of the city. Since Studio was in a coma, the responsibility for Alright City fell onto Radio and Widget. Widget was extremely reluctant to become the new mayor, so it was nice that Radio managed to convince him to take on the task. Finally, Radio also started channeling her overflow of magic into orbs. That way, said orbs could be used by Film for small, one-time feats such as teleportation, similar to what Studio had done. Now that Radio is slowly learning how to channel her power, I wonder where she'll go from here. For the majority of the book, Phantascope was attempting to rebuild his body and get his strength back. However, that didn't stop him from causing havoc. Not only did he manage to murder a family member of Video, but he also compiled enough magic to cast a spell over the barrier that would have destroyed all of social media. Plus, Phantascope's use of shadow magic was inadvertently hurting one of his assistants that he cared about. This made a decent conflict, as Phantascope was horrified at what was happening to Consolidation, but at the same time didn't want to stop piecing his new form together. Phantascope also had a moment of sadness when he learned why Truth had given him up when he was a kitten, and how he had felt unloved by everyone. What Phantascope did at the end, however, which I'll get into during the spoiler section, was one of the worst crimes he has ever committed. This made it tense when Video went after the mage and was determined to tear him to pieces. Alright, now onto the spoilers. I'll count to 3 seconds if you want to keep this book spoiler free. 1, 2, 3. And here we go! Some of the lore told by Truth in Phantascope definitely changed the perspective on media's history. One of the bigger reveals was the relationship between Phantascope and the Cinema Star. According to the mage, Cinema had once been his friend, but had allowed her father to massacre the monkey village that was Phantascope's new home. Later on, Cinema sold out her own family in order to save her own skin by allowing them to be killed. It was quite the shock to me, because during the brief moments Cinema had in the book, she had always been portrayed as wise and noble. It was a great twist. The second part of the book that flipped everything on its head was when Phantascope massacred the entire council. Not only did he kill every last member of the group on live TV, but he also managed to assassinate the king despite Video's best efforts to stop him. At the end of the book, this was what allowed film to take Cinema's place in the council and push for magic to be legal. He achieved this by lying that he had married Radio's older sister, which hinted that film may be the next villain. Having new faces at the head of the government was also a definitely interesting prospect for the next novel, as they've already made some major changes. Finally, the last confrontation between Video and Phantascope was absolutely brutal. Phantascope subdued Video through shadow magic and murdered her multiple times in various methods before reviving the courier. It was a hard chapter to read, but Video stayed strong throughout it as she tried to fight back after regaining consciousness each time. After several deaths, Video got control of the mage's cube through the trick she had learned from Radio. She used it to overpower Phantascope and tear him to pieces, at long last killing the mage for good. Although a part of me was sad to see a good antagonist die, it was also satisfying to see Video succeed and stand up to the cat that had tormented her. Overall, I give this book 3 stars. Although the start was good, I felt like the recaps and writing ended up weighing this book down. That said, the world building expanded upon a lot of good details. The fight between Video and Phantascope was well written in that it made me so happy when the mage was bested at his own game. I hope Tila will keep improving her craft and wish her the best of luck on her writing journey.